Hello, and welcome back to the Oracle Parlor podcast. I am your host, Phantasma Witch, aka Jenny, and I am excited for our first spooky story episode. So, for anybody here who knows me from TikTok or Instagram or even YouTube, you may have seen some of my paranormal story times. And if you listen to the first episode, you will know that I have had experiences with spirits, ghosts, entities my entire life. And so today we're going to be talking about my haunted Abuelita's house. So before we get into it, just a couple things at the top. First, a disclaimer. If you are uncomfortable with any of the topics that we are going to be talking about, I wanted to give this little disclaimer at the beginning. Because we're going to be talking about ghosts and spirits, we are going to be talking about things related to unalived people, people who are no longer around. If the discussion of ghosts is a little scary for you, you absolutely don't have to stick around for this episode. You can check out the next episode. We're going to be talking about something different. Intermittently, I will be sharing ghost stories with you all. So, just a little heads up. If you have your own personal ghost stories that you would like me to share as part of the podcast when I do these spooky story episodes, definitely send an email to the official podcast email, which is oracleparlorpod@gmail.com. You can submit your spooky story there. You can even title your email Spooky Story and share whatever ghost stories, weird paranormal experiences that you have had, or even questions that you have. And I would love to be able to share it on the podcast. So let's get started. As I've mentioned, we're going to be talking about my haunted abuelita's place. So, my grandma lives here in LA in a very small home, which has been around for a very long time. I'm not exactly sure when the house was built, but she has lived there for as long as I have known my grandma since I've been around. And my mother grew up in the house, and my grandfather actually built onto the house. The house is pretty small. There is a kitchen, living room. The setup is important to the story. I promise. There's a kitchen, which is connected to the living room. And from the living room, there's a hallway. At the end of the hallway is the bathroom, which is connected to the master bedroom, and a middle room, which is connected to a long bedroom in the back. And the middle room and the long bedroom in the back are the additions that my grandfather had made. So I have been visiting my grandma ever since I was a kid. And I never used to really think my abuelita's house was haunted. I didn't have the kind of experiences at my abuelita's place that I did at my own home. So in my mind, I never made the comparison that her place could even be close to haunted. As a matter of fact, I had an experience at my abuelita's place when I was a child that I completely forgot about until I was an adult. And I was reminded of some important information. So I wanted to start with the story of when I was a child. When we would go and visit my abuelita, she used to sleep in the front room on the couch, and she would let me and my sister sleep in her bed in the bedroom. And her bed in the bedroom faces a closet. And my abuelita has a lot of clothes from every era, and because of this, her closet usually was so packed and so full that the closet door just remained open. And I was one of those kids that was not comfortable with open doorways, hallways, closets. if I couldn't see into it clearly with a light, it made me a little uncomfortable. However, this was different. One night, while visiting my abuelita in her bed, I woke up, looked at the foot of the bed towards this closet where all my abuelita's clothes would be hanging. Except for this time, I noticed that there were men's clothes, what I thought were men's clothes, hanging in this closet. But as I started to look at it, I realized these clothes weren't hanging. They were actually being worn by a person standing in the closet. And I actually remember it very clearly. The outfit that they were wearing was high-waisted, either jeans or khakis, with a belt and a button-up long sleeve collared top, similar to a lumberjacket style plaid. But the weirdest part was I could see that this person was wearing these clothes and standing in the closet. I could see their hands. But when I tried to look at their face from the neck up, it was simply a silhouette. I couldn't see any details. I couldn't make out any information on the face. It kind of looked as if somebody, if you're an artist, you'll know what I'm talking about. It kind of looks like somebody took an overlay gradient and put it over their face. So at the top of their head, it was darkest. And then as it went down to their neck, it slowly faded. So I couldn't make out any features. Now, when I noticed this when I was a kid, I didn't think anything of it. It didn't register to me in my mind what I was seeing. Because this was a closet full of clothes, I didn't question why there was a man wearing these clothes, standing in this closet, a short man as well. And the only man in the household that my abuelita had was a very tall, large man. This was not him. So I took a look at it, thought it was just my imagination, didn't process what I was really seeing, rolled over, and I forced myself to go back to sleep. And it wasn't until I woke up the next morning that I remembered this. And I knew it wasn't a dream because I distinctly remember getting up and readjusting. And it was in that moment of reflecting on it that I looked at the closet and realized my abuelita did not keep men's clothes in that closet. And like I said, those clothes were for a very short man. And the only clothes in that closet were my abuelita's. So very frilly 80s skirts and dresses and things from the 60s and 50s, old clothes, not the kind of clothes that I saw. And then I remembered the head being this gradient of featureless silhouette. And it freaked me out. And I suppressed it. I made myself forget because it was too scary. Because, as I mentioned in the first episode, a lot of my experiences really scared me when I was younger. And I just could not process what I was experiencing and what I was seeing. And so I forgot about this completely. I acted as if it didn't happen. And then it became my reality where, oh no, it didn't happen until I was an adult. And this was only a few years ago where I was talking to my mom and I was telling her about the weird experiences at my abuelita's place, which I am about to get into even more. And this is when she told me, you know, the previous owner died in that house. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, this little old man. He passed away in the house at an old age, in the bedroom, actually, I think. And as soon as she said the little old man passed away in the bedroom, it was like I had been hit with a ton of bricks. And the memory of seeing this short, little old man in my abuelita's closet came rushing back to me in that moment. And I remember saying, "Oh my gosh, Mom, I think I saw this little old man." So, when I was going to college, see, my mom grew up down here in LA. My abuelita still lives in that same house, like I mentioned. However, when my mom got married, we moved up north to Sacramento. And so when I wanted to go to college, I wanted to go to college down here in LA. And so I had the absolute pleasure of moving in with my abuelita. I love my grandma. So I was actually really excited to be able to move in with her. And like I mentioned, I didn't remember this memory of the house being haunted. I never considered my abuelita's place to be haunted because I grew up in what I considered was a very haunted house. Well, I learned quite quickly how haunted my abuelita's place really is. So, the first thing that I started to notice when I moved in to her place for college was more often than not, I would be home alone. Now, when I say home alone, when I moved in with my abuelita, it was literally just me and her, no one else. We were the only two living in this tiny house together. So when I was home alone, I used to hear somebody in the house. And the thing is, the first few times that this was happening, I thought it was just my grandma coming home. Because as I mentioned, this house is old. And it has a lot of homemade additions. So, as you can imagine, the floors are squeaky, the doors are loud. You can't turn a doorknob without hearing it rattle. You can't walk across the floors without hearing them creak, even though they're carpeted. You can still hear the hollow thuds of each footstep, no matter where you are in this house, because it's so small and it just echoes. So the first few times that it happened, I just assumed it was my grandma walking around. Until one time, I was in my room working on homework, and I heard somebody walking around in the front room. So I called out, "Hey, Abuelita, I'm home," because she didn't know I was home from school yet. So I thought I'd let her know. No response. So I thought, well, that's weird. Maybe she didn't hear me. So I got up and I walked into the front. And before I could call her name out again, she wasn't there. Again, this house is very small. If you're standing in the front room, you're gonna bump into a person, no matter where they're at. And so I thought, well, maybe she's in the back because she had a backyard that she would often tend to, where the laundry room was. So I thought, okay, maybe she's doing laundry. So I walk outside, but as I walk outside, I noticed her car was not in the driveway. And I thought, well, maybe she took her old car in the back garage. So I walked around to the back. Nope, her car was there. Her old car was there, but her car out front was not. I think I said that wrong. Her car in the front was gone. Her car in the back was still there, meaning she was still out. That is the point I am trying to make here. I love that I don't get to edit this podcast, don't you? So that's when I realized for the first time that I had been hearing somebody in the house when no one was there. And this was the flag that was raised that maybe there was something going on. When it comes to spirits, when it comes to spirit activity, when it comes to haunted locations and homes, if you are not already acutely aware of it, sometimes it's very easy for your brain to logic it away. Sometimes you may not even notice it because you're just not paying attention, because it's simply background noise. And it's not until those moments of, oh, wait a minute, that was something strange, that was something different. It's not until that moment clicks, the light bulb gets turned on, that we start to become very aware and we open ourselves up to, well, something's happening here. So you're more open to seeing that, hearing it, experiencing it. And that's exactly what happened with me. I became very acutely aware of, was my abuelita gone? And if the answer was, yeah, she's gone, and I'm hearing things in the house, I started to take note of, okay, I'm home alone and somebody's walking around in the front room. Okay, I'm home alone and I just heard the door handle to the bathroom jiggle. And this became a common occurrence. And it didn't scare me. I thought it was actually quite fascinating because, again, my whole life, I never thought my abuelita's house was haunted. Never, never would have guessed because I completely suppressed it. But as I stayed there and became more aware, I started to have more and more experiences. I started to notice that as I was sitting in my room and working on projects for classes, that I would see something out of the corner of my eye. Before I get into it, I need to explain the bedroom setup a little bit. My bedroom was a long bedroom that had a little entryway of like two steps, and then the door was there. That door led out of my bedroom into the middle room, and that middle room is what connected to the main hallway. So I often left that door open in case my abuelita was calling me, needed anything, I could hear her. And sometimes she would pop her head in around the corner and she would talk to me and say, Mija, come out here, I need help, or whatever. So while I was sitting at my desk, which was faced away from the door and just over my shoulder, I could just see out of the corner of my eye this doorway. And so as I was sitting there working, I noticed that it looked like my abuelita was poking her head in and kind of taking a look at me and then going back into the middle room. And I didn't really think anything of it. Again, I was just like, okay, well, she's curious about what I'm doing. Maybe she's curious if I'm busy or if I'm home or whatever. So I didn't think anything of it. But then I started to notice, very much like the sounds, there were times where my abuelita was not home and I was seeing this thing out of the corner of my eye. And so I became very aware of it. Sometimes I'd be sitting at the other end of the room that I could face my TV, and this TV was next to this little entryway. And if I was watching TV or playing games, relaxing, out of the corner of my eye, I would see it peek into my room. And I wouldn't directly try to look at it because anytime I did, it would immediately disappear and dart away. So I started to get into the habit of not looking at it so I could try to look at it out of the corner of my eye. I didn't want it to know that I could see it right away because I was trying to understand what was happening. And I started to put together an image of what I was seeing. What I had thought was my abuelita poking her head in. I realized that I never actually saw the features of any person. I never actually saw my abuelita's hair, her glasses. I started to realize that it was simply a shadow. Again, it's like a silhouette. Now, am I saying this was a shadow person? If you know what a shadow person is, this entity, which I will do an episode all about entities, but no, this wasn't a shadow person. It literally looked like a shadow with glowing eyes that was kind of fuzzy around the edges, just kind of poking its head in. And I was curious about this. Again, I wasn't scared, so I was trying to understand what was the energy that this thing was giving off. And the more that I questioned, okay, what is this spirit, this shadow, what I dubbed as the peeking ghost? What does this peeking ghost want? And every time I was open and curious about it, I realized it was open and curious about me. That the reason why it was peeking in was simply out of curiosity, trying to see who's in there, who's working in there. Because, like I said, my abuelita lived alone and she had for a very long time. So, whatever this spirit was, simply wanted to know who is living in the house now. And that was the vibe that I got. And then I actually had this confirmed. One day, I was sitting at my desk working on an art project. And again, my back was towards the door. And I felt its presence. The energy shifted. And it kind of feels like when this happens, it feels like somebody is staring at you from across the room. It's not like chilling or scary or the hair on my neck stood up. No, it can happen that way. But with the peeking ghost, it was just sort of like it feels like when somebody walks into the room. And so I got that sensation of, oh, I think they're looking at me. And I would turn around, and every time I would turn around to look at the doorway, I would see this little shadow, whoop, peek, poke out of the room. It went from peeking at me to, oop, it would dart back into the middle room. And it kept doing that. And so I'm sitting there, I'm trying to work, and I kept feeling this presence enter the room. I'd go and I'd look, it'd disappear. And this had happened a few times, and I was starting to get kind of annoyed. I wasn't mad, I was just like, ugh. So I said out loud, because I was home alone. I said out loud, like, hey, I know you're there. It's okay if you're curious. But I'm just working on homework. It's an art project for this specific class, and this is the assignment. So, that's what I'm doing right now. And I'll be staying here for a while, working on school art projects and stuff. You're fine to peek in if you want, but if you don't mind, you're distracting me from my homework. I literally told the peeking ghost, you're kind of distracting me. I'm having a hard time focusing because I keep feeling you and sensing you and then seeing you, and it's starting to kind of distract me. After I said this, it didn't do it again. For the rest of the evening, it stopped peeking in on me and it stopped making its presence so known. And that was the first time in my life that I ever actually spoke to a spirit and put up a boundary with a spirit, which again, we're going to do an episode about boundaries with the living and the deceased. So at this point, some time had passed. I'd been living with my abuelita for about a year, maybe a little longer, and the peeking ghost was just a normal thing. Anytime I needed the peeking ghost to leave me alone, I would just tell the peeking ghost, like, hey, I can't right now. The other thing that was going on was the middle room where this peeking ghost would be was the coldest room in my abuelita's entire house. Now, if you've been to Southern California, in the summer, it gets extremely hot. It gets up to 98 or higher. And being that my abuelita's place is an old place, that place would be an oven in the summer, an absolute oven. The insulation was not great. Her AC was not great. I would tolerate it. However, that middle room, that middle room was the coldest room in the entire house. It was always cold. Even in 98-degree weather, it would be at least 10 degrees cooler in that room. Do I think it's paranormal? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe. I am not a building inspector. I'm not somebody who would know. But it was definitely strange that the coincidence. What's the coincidence that the ghost, this peeking ghost that I would always experience, the place that it was originating from was the same place in the house that was the coldest room in the house. Not only that, But this room had a very old vintage, still working, still great condition, lamp that was based off of touch. So to turn it on and to dim it, you would touch the metal base of this lamp. So the only way to turn this lamp on, to dim it and turn it off, is to physically touch the metal on the lamp. Now, there would be times where I would come home and that lamp in the far back corner of the room would be on. And I had asked my abuelita about this. I said, hey, grandma, were you in the middle room? And this was a room that she did not use. It was practically a storage room. So we never went in there. And because it was a storage room, this lamp was practically inaccessible unless you climb over boxes and boxes and suitcases and whatever. To reach the lamp was a lot of work. And so I would ask her, Abuelita, did you turn on the lamp? And she'd be like, no, mija. I thought you turned it on. And I was like, no. And this occurrence happened all the time. And I was convinced my abuelita must be playing a trick on me. She must be forgetting that she's turning the lamp on. I was convinced that's what was going on because unlike the Peking ghost, where I was seeing it, experiencing it, and talking to it, I couldn't verify this lamp. Again, I'm no electrician. I'm no building expert. I don't know what's happening. All I knew is that it took physical touch to turn on the lamp, and unless my abuelita was doing it and not telling me, there was no other reason for it. Until I was in the middle room, walking from the hallway through the middle room to my bedroom at night. The lights were all off. And I remember thinking it was so dark, I was having a hard time seeing where I was going through this messy, small middle room to get to my bedroom door. And as I thought that, the lamp turned on, as if it was helping me to get to my bedroom door, as if it was like, oh, don't worry, I got you. Here's some light. And I stopped and went, oh my gosh. I opened up my bedroom door. I turned to look into this middle room at the lamp, and I was like, what the heck? And then, boop, it turned off, as if somebody touched the base of it again. So just temporary, like, we're just going to turn it on until you need it and then turn it off. Despite all these experiences that I had been having with the Peking ghost at my abuelita's place, I still was not convinced. I was still so skeptical of my experiences because when I talked to my abuelita about it, she didn't have one thought or another about it. Did she think her house was haunted? She didn't like the word haunted, which makes sense. Being a very religious woman, I understand. She thought that it was more like loved ones visiting her, but she didn't want to call it haunted. So she would say, "Oh, it's like the angels. It's like my husband, my ex-husband's coming to visit me." She would say these kind of things. And she's like, "Yeah, I definitely think that something's here, but it's good. It's a good spirit." This is how she used to say it. It's good. So she never actually had the same experiences that I did. And if she did, she would not share them. That was as much information as she would give. Was she definitely thought something was there. But as to what she was experiencing, I had no idea. It wasn't until I met my now partner, my husband, that I finally started to think, okay, well, this isn't just me. When I met my partner, I had invited them over to hang out not too long after we met. Now, I don't go around telling people, or at least I used to not. Nowadays, yes, maybe more so, because it is my job. But back then, I didn't used to go around telling people, well, I live in a haunted house and let me tell you about my paranormal experience and yada, 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 yada. That's not what I would do. And a lot of the reason for that was because I didn't believe it myself fully. I believed that it could happen. I believed that it was a thing that was very much real. But I was so in denial of, well, it can't happen to me. Even though I grew up my entire life with all these unexplainable things, I always used to convince myself it was just me. I was just scared. I was just this. I was that. I was this. And we can talk about this in another episode about the self-doubt of experiencing intuition and experiencing spirits. So, despite all these experiences, I thought it wasn't really happening until he came over. And when they came over, we were hanging out in my bedroom. And the way that we were situated was I was sitting on one end of the bed facing him, talking to him, and they were sitting on the opposite end of the bed facing me. So behind me was that entryway where I would see the peeking ghost. Now, again, I want to clarify, I never told them about any of my experiences at my abuelita's place, at my home, or the fact that I even considered that I was experiencing any kind of spirit activity ever in my life. Never mentioned that. They didn't even know I was a tarot reader. They didn't even know I was into any of that stuff. Nothing, nada. So we're sitting there when we're talking, and I'm looking at them in the face, talking to them. And as I'm talking to them, their expression shifts from being invested in listening to what I'm saying to distracted and very serious. And I notice that their eyes are darting from me to behind me over my shoulder, and then back to me, and then again back behind me, as if they were trying to ignore and focus on me and ignore whatever was behind me. And I caught this very quickly. So I stopped talking and I said, "Are you okay?" And they said very seriously, yeah, no, yeah, no, it's fine. I'm fine." And I said, mm. I said, "No, really. Are you seeing something? Is something going on?" And they again darted their eyes to behind me and went, "Mm-mm, no, it's nothing. It's not. Don't worry about it. It's nothing." And I said, "No, no, no." I said, "I'm being serious. I'm very curious. Are you seeing something?" And they finally cracked and said, "Okay, you're not going to believe me. This is going to sound so weird, but I swear that I keep seeing this shadow peek its head around the corner in the entryway to your room and then dart back into the other room every time I look at it." The way that my heart jumped for joy, the absolute pure satisfaction that I got out of that moment. I didn't have fear. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, oh no, it's a haunted house. No, I was so excited because for the first time in my life, someone, well, not really the first time in my life, my mom and my sister had confirmed some of the experiences that I was having as a kid, but that was my mom and my sister. I knew them. They were family. We loved each other. They could have been lying to me to make me feel better. It's one of those things that you just kind of convince yourself it's nothing. But this was someone I had just met. I had never shared any of these experiences with. They didn't know anything about me. We had only known each other for like a week, maybe two. And here they were telling me exactly what I had been experiencing, what I had been seeing, what I had been sensing this entire time. They saw it and they told it to me and they described it exactly how I saw it. And I was so excited that and they were so confused at my excitement that I had to be like, "I'm so sorry. I'm just so happy right now because It feels so good to know that it's not just me. And then they went, wait, I'm sorry, hold on. You've been seeing this? And I'm like, yes. And so I shared all my stories and I was like, I dubbed it the peeking ghost. It's just curious. It's not scary. It's not anything, to be worried about. And it's funny because they actually confirmed those feelings too, saying, yeah, actually, I was going to say it just kind of feels like it's like, who is that? Who's in there? And so it's funny because after that had happened, I started telling the peeking ghost before my partner would come over, at the time, boyfriend. I would say in the middle room or towards the middle room, I'd be like, hey, so that person that I'm seeing, yeah, they're coming over today. So, don't worry about it. They're invited here. They're good. We're all good. And when I started doing that, the peeking ghost stopped poking its head in as frequently when they would come over, which also was a relief for them. But that wasn't the only thing that was going on in the house while I was dating my now husband. The activity in the home actually increased after I started to really acknowledge that I was experiencing something, especially after I had the confirmation from someone else that I didn't even really know that what I was experiencing was actually happening. So, one time I came home with my then boyfriend and I walked into the kitchen and said, okay, I'm going to make us some sandwiches for lunch. My partner said, okay, cool. I'm going to go plug my phone into your bedroom because my phone's going to die. And I said, okay, cool. So I turn around to the counter. I'm starting to make sandwiches and I hear my then boyfriend walk away. Because again, this is a very old home. It's very easy to hear and feel the vibrations of every footstep. I hear and I feel them walk away from me. And it sounded and felt like they got to the front room, turned around, and walked back into the kitchen right up behind me. And I said, hey, did you forget something? No response. And I turned around, no one was there. And I was trying to process what just happened because I know without a doubt I felt each footfall right up behind me. I sensed, again, that feeling of someone entering the room and being right behind me. So I walked into the front room thinking I would see them in the front room. Nope. Then I walked into the hallway. They weren't there. And I called their name, and from my bedroom, I heard them say, yeah. And I walk into the bedroom, and they had just finished plugging in their phone. And they were checking their text messages before they walked away. And I said, you didn't walk into the kitchen just now? And they said, no, I literally just walked in here. I was checking a message before I came back. And I was like, you, you didn't hear the foot, you didn't feel the footstep. No, like I was so flabbergasted and confused. And then I explained the situation to my partner. They never heard anything. They never sensed anything. But to me, it literally felt like they walked away, turned around, and walked right back up behind me. Another instance, and it's funny because a lot of these happened when they were visiting. Another instance, I went into the house. My abuelita and my boyfriend at the time, they were both there. And I went into the house to use the restroom. So I walk into the restroom, I close the door, and I'm not even there for a few seconds. And the door handle jiggles. And so I say, occupied, thinking that it was my abuelita or my boyfriend. But as soon as I said occupied, I heard my abuelita and my boyfriend talking outside because there was a window in the bathroom that was connected to the garden outside. And I was in such disbelief. I opened up the bathroom door, even though I was still in the bathroom. I opened up the bathroom door and looked into the hallway. There was nobody there. Nothing. We were the only people in the house, and the two other people that were in the house were outside. So I quickly finished up. I ran outside and I asked them both, did either of you come into the house to try to use the restroom? And they said, no, we've been out here the whole time talking. But I had not only heard, but I saw because when you're in the bathroom and you're sitting on the toilet, you're literally less than a few inches away from the door, and the door handle is at eye level. I saw that door handle move and jiggle, and I heard it. And it wasn't until I said occupied that it stopped. Another time, me and my then boyfriend were hanging out, as we do, in my bedroom. But this time we were laying on the floor talking. I think I had like my laptop out, like we were doing something on my laptop, and it was just easier to be sitting and laying on the floor together. And as we're there on the floor having a conversation, I start to hear like a woman talking. And so I thought it was my abuelita. And so I told my partner, I said, hold on, hold on. And I tried to listen, and I realized that the sound of the voice was muffled. And it wasn't just muffled like somebody's in the other room muffled. I mean, it was like this kind of muffled, as if they were trying to speak from behind something. And I didn't even say anything before my boyfriend said, do you hear that? Is that a woman? And I said, you hear that? And he said, yeah, it sounds like a muffled woman's voice. He was hearing the same thing. And I was like, where's that coming from? And we were trying to move our heads around to kind of hear where it was coming from. And then we noticed it was coming from the floor. When we put our ear close to the ground, it sounded like there was a woman softly talking from beneath the floorboards. And then it stopped. And we couldn't hear what she was saying because it was so muffled and it was so gentle and quiet. But I immediately hopped up, ran into the front room thinking maybe my abuelita had the TV on because she watches her stories, her telenovelas. I thought for sure she must have the TV on. Well, it was on, but it was on mute. And then I thought maybe it was my abuelita. Nope. She wasn't even inside the house. And she wasn't even talking. So I think it's safe to say my abuelita's house is haunted. It was haunted, and it still is. See, I wasn't the only person who ended up living with my abuelita. As a matter of fact, during my last semester of school, my sister was about to start her first semester. And so she moved into the room that I had been staying at in my abuelita's place. And I moved out to get an apartment for a temporary time. And my sister, she's not like me in the sense that she's not into the scary stuff like I am. And even at that, I don't like to call it scary stuff. She's just not into the paranormal like I am. I grew up loving Casper. She grew up loving The Little Mermaid. To give you some perspective of our personalities, right? She was the sparkly princess, and I was literally the goth kid in the corner. So, two very different types of personalities. And because of this, I did not want to scare my sister. I did not want to plant any kind of idea in her head that she was about to move into a haunted home. Because it's pretty uncomfortable for some people. And I just didn't know how she would take that. It wasn't that I didn't think that my abuelita's place was not haunted, because at that point, after all the confirmation, after all of the experiences that I had and shared with someone else, it was not even a question anymore. But like I said, I didn't want her to be freaked out. So I didn't say anything. I didn't tell her about it. I didn't say anything. Now, this is a special case because if I thought that she was in any kind of danger, if I thought that this thing that I was experiencing was in any way harmful, of course I would have told her. Of course I would have done something about it. But I'm a strong believer that just because something is paranormal, just because something is haunted, it does not mean it is evil. It does not mean it is bad. It does not mean that it is scary and something to be feared and something to be fought. And this is something we will get into in another episode. But this is the spooky story episode. So we'll keep it spooky, my friends. So I just didn't feel that there was any need to do anything in regards to the spooky stuff that was happening. I didn't feel any need to tell my sister about it because it wasn't enough to be anything to be concerned about. So I just didn't tell her because again, I didn't want to plant that seed and then have it turn into a fearful thing for her. Well, my sister moved in and lived there for a few months. And then one day we were hanging out. And she had said something that seemed interesting to me. She had made mention about the middle room. And she said, yeah, I, and this was completely unprovoked. I didn't mention anything about it. I didn't say anything. Somehow it came up in conversation where she said, yeah, it's really weird. That middle room just gives me a weird feeling. And I noticed that it was as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Similar to how I noticed my boyfriend was looking over my shoulder at the doorway. I got that same vibe of there's something more here that's not being said. So I said, "Yeah, that middle room is a thing, huh?" And she was like, "Yep." I said, "So is anything going on with the middle room?" And she's like, "You're not going to believe me if I tell you. Isn't that how it always starts?" Much like my boyfriend, you're not going to believe me if I tell you this. And so I told her, I said, try me. And so she tells me, it's the weirdest thing, Jenny. I'll be in the room, and from that entryway that connects to the middle room, I swear I'm seeing a shadow peek its head into the room. And I know it's not grandma because she's not in the house. And again, I was just laughing. I was so excited. And she was so confused. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I said, you finally met the Peking ghost. And she was like, the what? And so I proceeded to tell her about my experiences, and she lost it because she had no idea. Because again, I never told her. And she had the same exact experiences that I had had, that my boyfriend had had, the same site, the same location, the same everything. She also started telling me that the lamp in the middle room would turn on, that yes, it was still the coldest place in the whole house. Yes, she would hear people walking around. She'd think someone was home. No one was home. But the peeking thing around the corner, she would definitely see. However, few more months go by, maybe even a year. I forget how long it was. At this point, she and I both know about the Peking ghost. The difference was between me and her. When the Peking ghost bothered me, I would tell the Peking ghost, hey, can you please stop? And it would stop. My sister did not tell the Peking ghost when the Peking ghost was bothering her. And so instead, in her mind, she thought, I'll just close the door. Because if the door is closed, it won't come in. It knows to stay out. I'll just close the door. If you're not watching the video, I'm wearing a devious smirk right now because, of course, it didn't work. As a matter of fact, it made it much more abundantly clear that there was something paranormal happening. She told me that she began closing the door, hoping that it would stop the peeking ghost from appearing. But instead, what would happen is the door would be closed, and then she would hear the door open. She'd hear that old jiggle of the handle, the popping open of the door, the creak of the door. And she was thinking, oh, grandma must be checking in on me. And so she'd be like, what is it, grandma? No response. She'd get up to go look, and the door would always be cracked open about a foot. Never fully open, but always open. Now, here's the funny thing. The rule in my abuelita's house was she did not like that door being closed. My grandma did not want that door being closed. And it was almost as if the peeking ghost knew that this was a rule and started opening the door whenever my sister had the door closed. This would happen when my grandma wasn't home. This would happen when my sister was home alone. And sometimes at a certain point, I think I may have told my sister, just tell it to go away. Just tell it, please stop. And I think she started doing this because what happened next was she told me that there was one time where she had the door closed. And again, she heard the door handle jiggle as if the door was about to open. And again, she'd be home alone. So she told the spirit in the middle room, this peeking ghost, she said, excuse me, I have that door closed for a reason. And then the door handle would stop jiggling and the door would remain closed. So that is the story, the mini stories of my abuelita's haunted home. From my own personal experiences to having those personal experiences confirmed by somebody else to telling nothing to my sister and then having her have the same exact thing happen with no outside influence at all. Now, do I think my abuelita's house is still haunted to this day? Absolutely. I don't know if it's as active, but I also don't know because I don't live there. I don't get to go as often as I'd like to. And honestly, my sister is working pretty much full time, so there's not a lot of people there to have those experiences anymore. But I definitely think that that activity is still active. Now, you may be wondering, okay, so what was it though? What was it? What was the peeking ghost? And while I may not have all the answers, I do have theories. And I have a theory which was recently confirmed by a fellow medium. So, my theory for a while now was that this peeking ghost may have actually been my bisabuela, my great grandma. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm still learning Spanish. Forgive me. My great grandmother. Because that middle room used to be her room before she went into an elderly home. Because my great grandma had was slowly getting dementia. It was something that ran on that side of the family. It's something that runs in that family. So my abuelita took care of her at her own home, and my great grandma's room was that middle room. There was a bed in there. The touch lamp was for her to have easy access. Yes, it was a retro lamp that my grandma just happened to have, but it was an easy access turn on and off, which is also why I think that's why that lamp would turn on so easily for her. So this was her room. And while she may not have passed in the home, she did spend a lot of time in the home. And like I said, whenever I tapped into this energy of the peeking ghost, the vibe that it would give was just curiosity. It didn't know who I was. It didn't know who my partner was. It didn't know who my sister was. Especially when I first moved in, especially when my sister first moved in, and when my boyfriend first started coming to visit, when my partner first started coming to visit. It just didn't know, so it was curious. And the thing is, At that time, my great grandmother did not know who I was because she had forgotten almost everybody in the family. And she wouldn't recognize me anyways. If she did have that memory, she wouldn't know. And if she did, then it would make sense why she was just curious because again, the home had been completely, practically all unlived in, except for my abuelita, who only used like the front room, right? So that was my theory for a long time. Whenever anybody asked me, "What do you think that thing was?" I would say, "Well, it could have been my great grandma because that was her room." And then I had a reading with a medium. I don't actively go out and seek other psychics and other mediums, not because I'm not interested, but simply I do the work myself. It's not something I feel like I need, but I will practice on occasion in different online communities with people who would like to practice. Since I have a lot more professional experience, I like to be able to provide feedback to anybody who would like that feedback on their practice, on how they're tapping in, and so on and so forth. So I try to provide that to people who are learning, but I also try to, maybe if I want to try something new in my practice, I definitely will not practice something new on a client. I will usually do a trade with someone so that way I can practice something different. Anyways, so one time I was doing a trade with this person I had never met before. I have no idea who they are. I don't even remember what their name was because, again, it was a random pairing where we were on an online community. We both got randomly paired to practice together. And they connected with my great grandmother. And I actually still have the notes somewhere here in my desk. But they had said that my great grandmother was telling me that, oh, yeah, I brought your husband to you. I brought him to you. I got you two together. And I was so confused because I was like, what does that even mean? And then it hit me. One of the reasons why me and my partner bonded immediately and so quickly when we first started dating was because of the peeking ghost. Because we had this shared paranormal experience with this peeking ghost, we bonded so much faster, so much deeper, so much quicker because all of a sudden this new vast world had been opened up and we were sharing paranormal experiences. We were sharing our stories with each other. We were talking about our beliefs and our, ideas about the paranormal and ghosts and spirits and all that. So if it wasn't for the Peking ghost, I don't know how that would have played out. Not to say I wouldn't have fallen in love and yada yada yada, but it was just so funny that my great grandma was going to this medium and pretty much taking credit for hooking me up with my with my husband. And I just absolutely adore that. So it was really cool. And this is why I think it's really great to, you know, it can be really fun and really eye-opening to have these experiences with um, other psychics and mediums and practitioners when you can, because it can give you this really cool eye-opening experience where I always kind of logically thought, yeah, I must be my great grandmother because of these logical reasons. I never tapped in intuitively to really find out that answer. So when I got somebody who was tapped in intuitively, who knew nothing about me, who said, "Oh yeah, your great grandma's taking credit for like introducing you and like bringing you two together." That was the big green flag of, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly who it was, wasn't it? That's who the Peking ghost is. It's my great grandma." And that's not a story I've shared with anybody. So this is the first time I've gotten to share that story about this medium confirming this for me, which was absolutely magical. So I hope you all enjoyed these stories of my abuelita's haunted place. Thank you so much to listening to this episode of the Oracle Parlor podcast. Yes, I finally have a name. It took me a while, but I am so excited to have you here. If you are interested in getting more, having more interactions with me, make sure to check out my Patreon. My Patreon is Phantasma Witch, just like my handle everywhere. And I have things available for free members, but I also have things available for paid members. So there's free content on there. But for my paid members, you can get things such as access to a Discord community of like-minded, witchy, psychic, paranormal folks. And in that Discord community, you can chat about different things, but at a certain tier, you can also do partner pairings with other people to practice whatever it is that you want to practice. You can also get access to the monthly magical workshops. These are workshops that I do every month that follow a theme. So, for example, in February, the theme was relationship with Venus energy. And so we talked about how to connect in with the collective energy of essentially Valentine's Day and how to use that energy for love, self-love, romantic love, yada, yada, yada. And so every month I try to make that the theme, whatever's going on that month, to connect in with that collective energy. And usually, what is included is first a discussion on the themes, education, because, I'm a teacher, I gotta teach. And then after that, we set intentions for what it is that we're trying to achieve. We do a guided meditation. And then at the end of the class, we have some journaling prompts and we charge a candle with our intentions that we had set earlier in the class. So that's the monthly magical workshop that you can get access to if you are a paid member on my Patreon. You can also get access to behind the scenes clips in which I post different behind the scenes of my everyday magical workings or whatever's relevant at the time. The first behind the scenes clip was a little sad because the fires were happening in LA. So that behind the scenes clip was what was my magical tools that I decided to grab in case my place burned down. But it was a cool way for me to show the tools that really matter a lot to me and the stories behind them. And you can also get access to the Q&A on Patreon. The Q&A is where I will take your questions and I will answer them either on the podcast or on one of my lives that I do. So, speaking of lives, every month at the end of the month, I do tarot scopes. This is where I pull a single tarot card for each and every astrological sign. You can apply this to your sun, your moon, and your rising sign for the guidance for the month ahead. You can actually go and watch previous ones on my YouTube right now. The first one of the year, January, is only on my Instagram because I hadn't done it on YouTube yet, so forgive me. But yes, you can also follow me on YouTube, follow me on Patreon. Like I said, it's also free on Patreon. You don't have to be paid. You can follow me on Blue Sky. Blue Sky is more of like my random thoughts here and there. At the moment, I am still on TikTok and Instagram. However, I don't know how long that's going to last. So just a heads up, the best places to find me are probably Patreon, YouTube, and Blue Sky. If you would like to book a one-on-one session with me, whether you would like a tarot reading, palm reading, pet communication session, or you would like to have personal one-on-one guidance, definitely check out my website, phantasmawitch.com. So, Phantasma is spelled Fantasma, witch, WITCH.com. And you can find all of my services there. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you have a question for the podcast, if you have a spooky story for the podcast, send an email to oracleparlorpod@gmail.com. I am so excited to read your stories. I hope you enjoyed these stories. And I look forward to talking with you all on the next episode. Thank you again.